Hi everyone, today I'll be going through Topaz Adjust AI, what it is, how it works, and what it can do, right after this. Alright, so let's have a look at Topaz Adjust AI. Now, Topaz Adjust AI is another one of the AI suite from Topaz, and this is designed to try and allow you to make intelligent adjustments to your photo to try and get the best out of your photo as quickly and easily as you can. So its interface is very similar to everything else. Click on Open, and I'm going to go into a folder where I have some example photos. I'm going to start off with this photo of a lemur from a zoo. Now, the way that this interface is set up is very, very similar to all of the AI stuff. You've got your central window screen. You can put a split on or dual view. So with a split, the left-hand side is before, right-hand side is after. If you want to fit, press fit. If you want to zoom, you can zoom in or out. Fit will take you back to fit, obviously. So the first thing to start off with within the Topaz Adjust AI is this Auto Adjust AI. And so by picking this, what it's going to do is it's going to try and understand what changes it can make to improve your photo. And it'll look at things like colors, contrast, all of those sorts of things. So if I move this across, straight away you can see that the lemur pops compared to what it did before. It's not a huge change, but it is definitely a change. The eyes, there's far more detail, and the color is just a lot better. So that's the first thing. At the moment we're on standard and the strength is 1, which is basically 100%. Now, if you didn't want this to be as strong, you could always bring this back to a lower number, but I'm happy with 1. Now, there is also Hdr Style, and Hdr Style will tweak the shadows and highlights and all of those things as well, typical HDR. But you can see it doesn't work for every photo. It really depends what you're trying to achieve. So, you know, for this, I would stick to standard because I think that works pretty well when you look at the before and the after. So I'm going to turn split off, and I'm just going to work on this image. And this is now just showing me, as I make a change, what's the impact to the image. If I want to look at preview, I can, if I want to look at the original, I can just press original and it'll show the difference. So like any photo editor, you've got the basic brightness. So you might want to reduce the shadow, reduce the highlights, maybe bring the shadows up, possibly even down a little bit for more contrast. Change your white points, your black points, whatever suits. I think most of these are probably, you know, I don't think I necessarily need to change them. So I'm just going to leave them largely how they are. Maybe just bring contrast up a tiny bit. It's personal preference. So I've also got color options, so I can change the temperature of the photo. So maybe I want to just make it a tiny bit warmer, just subtle. And maybe I want to increase the saturation. Now, obviously, all the way is going to look stupid, and I wouldn't suggest doing that, but you know, it really depends what you're trying to achieve. So we've also got clarity. Clarity kind of brings out details in some of those shadow areas as well. But there are different sizes. So you kind of look at what works for you. So, you know, high clarity might be better than low clarity or micro. You know, micro can also look a little bit like noise sometimes. So, you know, you might even want to make that minus. So you can see this is starting to bring out a little bit more detail when I bring up the clarity. So clarity is a little bit like localized contrast is probably a good example to look at that. Detail is another section that's definitely worth looking at. So detail is trying to do it, but from what I can see, it's trying to do it without changing the color. Again, small detail, you're probably going to, if you bring that up too much, it'll look like noise, and you can see up the top of the image it's doing that. So maybe large detail will just... So there's also split tone. Split tone is really about how saturated you want the highlights and shadows to be, and do you want them to have a certain tint. So let's say, for example, we want our highlights to be a little bit warmer. What we can do is we can increase the highlight saturation and change the hue. Now, obviously, if we go all the way, it's just going to look silly. So, you know, with a lot of these things, it's about being subtle. Shadow hue, might want it to be a bit cooler. And we can then adjust the balance accordingly. There is the option for grain, if you do want to add grain to your photo. And you can see around the tree trunk at the back, it's sort of bringing that in, and you can change the size of the grain as well. But in my case, I don't think it needs any grain. So another thing that's really worth knowing is that there is also opacity. And so opacity lets you change how much of this is shown. So you might decide, well, maybe I've gone a little bit too far. Let's just dial it back a bit. Let's drop it down to 85%. And so maybe that looks a little bit nicer. So if I'm happy with all of these settings, and maybe I've got a few of these photos, I might want to add this. So I can save this as a preset. I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to give it a name. So call it animal and save. And then if I click on presets, I then have the option of going from featured to my collection, and I can see animal. So I can apply that preset. Now there are lots of other presets as well. So you might want to see what works for you out of presets first. You might decide, actually, you know what, bright and detailed. Maybe I want it to be a bit sort of dark and moody, or whatever may be the case. Structured. So see what works for you. But presets are a really, really handy tool. It, I think, is really useful because if you're going to make a lot of changes, you can then just use those. So if we look at the before and after, this is the photo before, this is the photo after. Now I have probably been a little bit aggressive in some of this, but when we go to controls, you'll see the fair majority of it was actually Auto Adjust AI that's made the improvement changes. So if I turn this off, we're at this before, turn it on, we're at this after. So, you know, it is trying to improve the colors and those sorts of things. Now, if I'm happy with this, I can then just click Save As, and I can save the format. So do I want it to be JPEG? I'm fine with that. What file name do I want? Where do I want it saved? What quality and what color profile? So if you're posting anywhere on the internet, I generally suggest sRGB, but you may have a need for a different one, and then click Save. And that will then process and save your photo. So I hope this has been useful. This is version 1.0.5. If you do like this, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, like the channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.
Always do it on my own, so I gotta get through it. And the only thing I know is to love what I'm doing. Never give up, never slow, till I finally prove it. Never listen to the no's, I just wanna keep moving. Yeah, I put out all this art, it's my only medicine. Yeah, everything I do, I'm just being genuine. Yeah, I'm sick of being screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.